Hello, Michael Matter from Vienna, Austria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Perry. How are you today?
Great, thank you so much. And we're here to discuss European firearms ownership, specifically in Austria, where you reside. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin?
Yes, of course. I'm close to 40 years professional in the field of security. It was the military, intelligence service, private security industry, court experts. So I've pretty much seen it all.
Great, great. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll learn a lot from your experience.
Thank you.
In terms of firearms ownership in Austria specifically, maybe later on we'll expand to the European Union, but in Austria specifically, as a private citizen, what types of firearms am I eligible to own?
Um, Maybe I start with explaining the different categories of firearms Austrian law knows. There's the Group C firearms. It's those firearms you do not need a permit for. If you obtain such a firearm, the only thing the law requires is that you register it with a database at the Ministry of Interior. It doesn't matter if you buy it from a professional arms dealer or if it's a private purchase. And this includes more or less all kind of rifles and shotguns. None, not automatic
Okay.
rifles and shotguns.
Does it has does it have to be a single shot or
No,
something?
it could be a double barrel. It could even be just a triple barrel shotgun. Doesn't make any difference. And all kind of hunting rifles and even old military carbines. They fall under the category. You're allowed to buy them. You do not need any permit. You just have to register them.
So the
And
the number of the firearm is registered with the licensing authority, if I understand correctly.
that's true. That's true. That's true.
Okay,
And in theory, central authorities should always know which kind of weapon is owned by which citizen.
I see. Okay, and that is category C.
C, yes.
Okay.
Category B is more or less the whole amount of handguns we know and some specific named semi-automatic rifles. We know that from different kind of military assault rifles, also civilian versions are made. Like for instance, the AUG, you can get it as a military
Mhm.
version or a civilian version.
Right.
And the Austrian law knows a certain amount of uh, semi-automatic weapon that it's treated as the same way as a handgun, and you need a permit. But if you got the permit, you can buy such a weapon.
Okay, so category B, if I understand correctly, requires a permit,
A permit, yeah.
and it consists of firearms that the authorities view as maybe more of a threat to the public safety because you can't rob a grocery store or a gas station with a
Right, right,
shotgun. Okay.
right. And I think as much as I know about the situation in Israel, the permit in Austria is not issued for a certain type of weapon. It just says you can purchase two kind of this weapon.
Right, and you are correct about the situation in Israel. In Israel, it's funny because if someone has two or three firearms, usually sports people, and they actually have three cards, and that is in itself it seems kind of strange, but that's a situation here. Yes.
Yep.
So
And the last group, the group A, is I think it's of not interest for us now because this is military and restricted weapons, and I can hardly think of any reason that uh, a civilian would get such a license.
okay, and is there something like we have an organizational permit that someone works, let's say for the electric company or a security company providing security elsewhere, he's issued a firearm by his employer. It's not a personal license, it's
No,
organizational.
no, no,
No
no,
such
no,
thing.
no, no. it might be that the firearm is owned and issued by the company, but the license has to be the private license of the person that actually make use of the firearm.
So in theory, I could, as a civilian, I could buy a firearm, a Category B, Glock 19,
Yes,
and work with it if my employer requires it, if I understand correctly.
that's true. That's true. Or you could give it to one of your employees, who of course must have a permit. But I give you an example. You have the security company here in Austria, and you buy a Glock 19, and I'm your employee, and you want me to use this gun. So
Okay.
what you have to do is you have to check that I have the permit,
Okay.
and then we have to do some paperwork that you are handing over this gun to me,
And does this
and you have
paperwork
to.
have to go through the authorities, the paperwork? Or
No,
just,
you have to report it to the authorities later.
oh, okay. So I can, if I check that you have the license, I can transfer the gun to you, but then I have a certain period to report it.
Yes, if you want to transfer it permanently to me, but if you just hand it out on a daily basis to me, then it could be done that I sign in at the company just as I do for, I don't know, a flashlight and a radio
Oh,
and the
really?
gun. Yeah, it's just that the employer has to be very sure that I am allowed to carry this gun.
Yes. So they would probably keep a copy of the license or something with it.
Of course, yeah. Mhm.
I see. Okay. So two categories applicable to regular citizens: the C category, the B category, and the C category. Is there a limit on the number of firearms? Because you did mention two
No,
firearms
no,
in B category.
no. You can purchase an unlimited number of C category weapons. It's only so that at some certain point the authorities might get interested in you if they know that you have amassed, I don't know, 120 rifles at home. They might take a closer look at you.
Mhm.
But if you have a good argument for that, you are collecting certain types of weapons. Then I give an example, not for category C weapons, for category B weapons. I know someone who just now owns 75 or 78 Luger pistols.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's collecting them.
Okay.
He's collecting them, and he has a permit for 75 or 78 pistols.
But pistols are category B, and you're only
Yes,
allowed two.
yeah. No. This is a special kind of permit.
Oh, okay.
The number two is for the first time owner. So any first time owner gets a permit for two weapons.
Oh, I see.
That's the rule. And then after 5 years, you can apply for extension of it to 5 weapons.
After how many
The
years? 5 years?
after 5 years, the argument is that within those 5 years, you should have had at least one check by the authorities if you store them in a proper way.
Oh,
And
okay.
if you have had them for 5 years and you haven't committed a crime with those weapons, you are seen as reliable enough to get another permits for 5 weapons. But if
Of
you
the same B category.
of the same B category, yeah. But if you have a really good reason, then you can apply for 20, 100, 500 weapons.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
And
if you can prove that you, and I know this guy, and I'm pretty sure that certain government authorities took a close look on this person.
oh, definitely.
They found out that he is not a political radical or something like that, a madman. He is a solid collector of those weapons, and they made certain requirements. He needed a safe room where he stores them and alarm system and everything. But in theory, everything is possible.
And what are the requirements of someone owning B category firearms or C category firearms in terms of uh, 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 um, safety, safe, and other such safety procedures?
That no person who doesn't fulfill the requirements to touch or grab or hold a weapon has access to these weapons without doing, without committing a sort of really lot of violence, like breaking open the safe or something like that. But it's not specified that you need it has to be steel or something like that. No.
So if I have a locked apartment, then in theory I meet the requirements, or do I have to have bars on the windows, or?
It always depends on the police who do the check. They come and if they are satisfied, then you don't have a problem. If they are not satisfied, they could require another safety feature attached or something like that. But normally that any a closed trunk or something like that would be enough.
I see. Okay. Yes, it sounds much more lenient than in Israel. In Israel, it's well, as you know, we are a one firearm country. That's for in most cases, and we're required a safe, and that's the requirements are pretty clear. In terms of firearms ownership statistics, I understand that our countries are pretty similar in terms of population. Am I?
Yes.
And we have about 150,000 or 160,000 armed citizens, not including the organizational licenses, which I discussed previously. How many firearms are there in Austria?
I cannot quote you the exact numbers right now, but we were talking about this matter some time ago when I was in Israel, and I gave you the figures then, and as I believe it was about the triple as much, 3 times as much, but I'm not really sure. I can only tell you that there are estimates about the amount of illegal weapons, and
Right.
this is really frightening. This is really frightening.
Yeah. But I'm trying to get at the question of gun violence, because one of the things that prevents more openness in terms of firearms licensing in Israel is the position held by the regulating authority, the Ministry of Public Security, that more firearms will eventually lead to more gun violence, more robberies and murders and things of that nature.
No. That's in most criminal acts that involve the use of firearms in Austria are committed by people who hold these firearms illegally. That's a fact. That's a fact. And it's only very few that are legal owners of these guns.
But are the illegal firearms used in these crimes in Austria obtained from firearms smuggled into Austria from other countries, or stolen from law-abiding citizens, police, military within Austria?
No, I don't think though that they are from stolen weapons. It might happen that if you have a break-in and that the burglar really grabs a weapon from you, that this weapon might show up one day during a criminal act. But most of these weapons they are either remains of the war, still remains of the Second World War, or we had a great influence that was during the Balkan Wars in the 1990s. Huge amount of illegal weapons came into this country, and I can remember even before that, even when there was still the Iron Curtain dividing Europe, there were some places in Vienna. You knew you go there, you can buy an illegal weapon that comes from a Tokarev from Russia or something like that. So it's not a problem if you know the right people.
Right. And how bad is the situation in terms of gun violence? Is it something you hear about in the news?
No. We have seen a dramatic increase in knife violence. This seems to be a new international tradition, that people are using knives or machetes on other people.
Really?
Yeah. But gun violence is not a problem in Austria.
I see. Okay, and one more question in terms of private ownership of firearms. What are the regulations in terms of undergoing some type of safety briefing, maybe um, firing the gun at the range under the supervision of an instructor? Is that something that, okay, I see you laughing, so I understand that I'm way off.
Yes, yeah. Well, no, you're not way off in theory. You are describing the situation, but if you take a closer look, it's somewhat maybe different from the situation in Israel. Well, first of all, there are certain people who do not need this regular training. It's law enforcement officers, military personnel. They are considered to know how to handle a weapon.
Yeah. Okay.
So that leaves the rest, and the rest, there are some who are engaged in shooting competition in clubs, but simple to be a member of a club that fires sporadically a rifle is not enough. You have to prove it to the authorities that you are really practicing member of this.
Okay.
Right? So you don't need it either. But the rest need a so-called refresher course every 5 years.
Every 5 years. Okay.
Every 5 years. Every 5 years. This is done by any gun store, rifle range. They offer it. It costs something like 50, 60 euro. It depends. It includes a lecture that lasts about half an hour. And then you are required to fire 5 shots.
5 shots.
Yeah, you're not required to hit the target. You are required to fire. Yeah, no. You are required to fire 5 shots, and those 5 shots is just that the trainer watches you. Are you able to handle the handgun? Do you know that? Oh, well, I have to put the cartridges in the magazine.
Right.
From the top, and I have to insert the magazine in the gun from
right.
below, and I have to load it, and that's the reason for it. But you don't have to hit the target. There's no requirement for that. So since this is done every 5 years, and you have to fire 5 shots, you need 1 shot a year to keep up.
I understand why you were smiling.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, pretty lax in that area.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. And if I
and it's, excuse me if I interrupted, I had to do about 2 or 3 refresher courses with that, and it's simply frightening if you listen to the people meeting the gun store when they were talking about how they handle the weapon and what to do with it and how they store it. It's frightening.
But I would expect, if that's a situation, I would expect that there would be more, God forbid, accidents and fatalities as a result of.
Yeah, but knock on wood, it doesn't happen.
Not the case.
No, not the case. No.
If I own more than 1 firearm, do I have to undergo this qualification with the different firearms? If I have a pistol and a rifle and a shotgun, do I have to qualify with the 5 bullets with each of them, or just one?
No, you don't have to qualify for the rifle and the shotguns at all. You only have to qualify if you have a permit, and the permit you only need for handguns or semi-automatic rifles.
Oh, right.
So okay. For your shotguns or hunting rifle, you don't need this kind of course. No, you have to decide. You own a pistol and you own a revolver, and you go to this course and you say, well, you want to do it with a gun, with a pistol or with a revolver. Nobody cares.
I see. Interesting. Okay, and now
in theory,
Yeah.
sorry, in theory, if you own a pistol, a Glock and a Smith & Wesson revolver, and you use the pistol for your professional duty, and you go to the refresher course and say you have a revolver, you are required to fire 5 shots with a Smith & Wesson every 5 years. And in theory, you could carry your Glock for professional reasons for 20 years and have never fired a shot with it.
Amazing.
Yep.
I guess regulations come in when there are problems. I guess you haven't had any problems, so you don't have any regulations.
Oh, we have enough for regulations in Austria, but
Interesting. And in terms of one, one more question I have, because I have a scheduled call with a very interesting individual in the field of insurance, and we're going to be discussing insurance for firearms holders. Is there any insurance that I would have to carry as a professional or even as a civilian owning a firearm?
no, not never heard of that, and not that I know of anything like
So
that.
even if I get a firearm as part of my duties in a guard company of some kind or other type of occupation.
Well, as an employee in a guard company, you don't need an insurance. The guard company has the
Right.
insurance,
Even though
but
it's my firearm.
yeah,
I see. Okay. And moving on to the rest of Europe, sounds like a big question, but specifically if I would like to go hunt in Germany, I'm a Class C firearms owner. I have a shotgun, and I'd like to go hunt wild boar in Germany, or the opposite. How would that go? Would Germany recognize my Austrian? Um, it's not even a license. It's a ownership, I guess.
you have to fulfill the local regulations. If you want to go to Germany, you have to fulfill the regulations that apply to a German citizen. So if the German citizen needs a license for a hunting rifle, and you want to take yours from Austria into Germany, you have to get this license before. There's something that is called the European Firearms Passport, but this is simply a document that helps to transfer the weapons. It's not a substitute for having the local permits.
Okay, and if I am a citizen of Austria, would the German authorities need to treat me equally as they would a German citizen, or would
Yes,
they?
yes. If you are a European Union citizen living in Austria, in regard of the firearms law, you are treated equally with a European with an Austrian citizen. And it's even possible for a third country citizen, but then it's getting complicated, of course.
That would be my next question. What if I'm not a citizen? What if I'm a resident, or maybe even someone temporarily in Austria on a student visa?
Well, I doubt that on a student visa you will get a permit in Austria, but if you have if you have a professional living in Austria and working in Austria, then the authorities might grant it. But this is then it's on the discretion of the authorities to do so. There is a regulation in the firearms law regarding law enforcement and professionals like here. A foreign prime minister, a president comes to Austria and he has his own bodyguards, and so they are then they are allowed to carrying the weapons. They have to register it ahead. So the Austrian authorities have to know which kind of weapons are brought into Austria.
Right.
But those people do not need a special permit then.
It's very interesting, because it seems that different countries, obviously there are fundamentally different, they are in fundamentally different situations. Israel's security situation is much different than Austria's, but we have the same amount of population, give or take. Okay, you have 3 times the amount of firearms, again, give or take, and the 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 general view of the authorities on this issue is just completely different, which is just amazing, because many people here hold the position and these are people that most of them served in the military. They hold the position that if you give more firearms permits, then all hell will break loose, and you'll have violence, gun violence on a daily basis. And it's amazing that in Austria that's not the case.
No, and I give you another example. Though it's not a member of the European Union, but take a look at Switzerland. In Switzerland, it's for many decades the case that the reserve military, they have their assault rifles at home.
But I think that Switzerland is a very good example, because that's maybe something that's rooted in tradition and therefore education.
Yeah.
And I, viewing what is going on in Israel now with COVID-19 and all the hardship, and really people are pushed to the limit. And we have, I'm sure you've heard and followed this, we have demonstrations against the current prime minister. And we've had quite a few cases where we had physical violence against the demonstrators, mostly with improvised weapons, whether it's sticks and clubs, and a few instances where pepper spray was used. And I ask myself, if we had more firearms in Israel, whether, God forbid, we would see those in these types of extreme situations. I mean, look at what is going on in the United States right now. I'm not sure
but the United States are a good example that it's not the case, Perry, because there are so many weapons in the United States that, considering the number of violent occasions we have met and the level of violence, you would expect the mass extinction by now.
Yes, definitely.
And that's not the case. There have been some attacks with firearms. That's true, but most violence is done with clubs and baseball bats and knives and fire bombs, and not with weapons.
Yes, I think that balance between people protecting themselves with firearms as the ultimate equalizer between humans. You could have an old gentleman who is defending himself against a few very young and well proportioned young men. You could have a petite woman defending herself in the same situation, and the balance between someone using a firearm, whether obtained legally or illegally, for the exact opposite situation or opposite objective. So that finding that balance, I think, is the key.
I believe that the government should have more trust into its own citizens. I mean, you trust. Let me accelerate on that example of Israel you gave me. If I trust in people being high-ranking military commanders or law enforcement officers, and at the same time I don't trust them that they own privately a firearm, that's insane.
But those individuals are granted firearms, but they are restricted to one firearm with a select number of rounds. We have in most cases 50 rounds and a pistol. But the other, everyone else, I mean, they have to meet categories. And I would say, I don't have the specific numbers, but most people are not eligible. You have to be a infantry unit veteran. You have to be a certain rank in the military. You have to be living in an area designated as being dangerous, practice certain sports, but other people are not eligible for a firearm. And the big question is, when you say we need to trust our citizens, is if it's only a matter of trust, or maybe also a matter of educating the public, maybe increasing enforcement for violators of the law. What's your position on this?
Um, One approach would be through criminal law, that you categorize any criminal activity that includes the use of weapons, and you have stiffer penalties for that.
Yeah. Is there any education related to firearms and firearms culture in Austria? Is that something that exists outside these gun clubs that is voluntary? No.
No.
It's very interesting. It would seem that in a country which is under threat, like Israel, and considered around the world as an authority on matters of security. You know, I read articles and saw videos where people said, yeah, oh yeah, in Israel you can go to a police station and just sign a form and get an M16 or something, which is utter nonsense. It would seem that in this country, with so many people having served, there's maybe this public sentiment that says firearms should be restricted to military and other law, other, you know, security forces. And in Austria, it's more of a civilian viewpoint.
Yeah, could very much be. Okay.
Very interesting. Michael, I want to thank you for your time. It was, as always, a very interesting discussion. I'm sure our viewers and hopefully maybe regulators as well could benefit from this very unique viewpoint on the other side of firearms ownership. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. Have a nice day. Good evening. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you.